border city of Ahvaz. They were met by huge crowds of mourners, the first stop on a tour of the country.
In the Iranian city of Ahvaz, a tide of people stretches as far as the eye can see. Mourners paying their respects to their fallen hero, General Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani was the mastermind behind Iran's clandestine military operations in the Middle East and a close ally of Iran's supreme leader. His assassination is considered a declaration of war by many Iranians, both ordinary citizens and those in power. In Tehran, lawmakers chanted "Death to America," and the parliament speaker condemned the US for committing what he labeled a big crime.
The savage action of the U.S. president is considered a military act of terrorism. You ought to know that this adventure will have painful consequences for you.
There was also saber-rattling in Washington, with US President Donald Trump threatening on Twitter to hit Iran hard and fast in the event of any Iranian retaliation. If Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, he tweeted, "We have targeted 52 Iranian sites, representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago." It's a reference to the hostage crisis at the American embassy that followed the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the event that turned Tehran and Washington into arch enemies. Enemies they're to this day. And the latest developments have many people worried that the historic animosity between the two countries could lead to war in the present. It's prompted Americans to stage peace protests in several cities.
It's a provocation to war, and it's extremely dangerous, and anybody who wants peace has to stand up and say no at this time.
As pacifists protest, more US soldiers are leaving for the Middle East. Donald Trump has said 3,500 extra troops would be sent to the region.
Well, for more on this, let's talk now to DW reporter Chase Winter, who covers the Middle East. Chase, we've been seeing huge crowds turn out for the funeral procession in Iran. How unified is the country behind the regime right now, do you think? Do they want to see retaliation?
Well, Soleimani was very close to the supreme leader and one of the most popular public figures in Iran, according to polls. So the net effect of this is it's created a rally around the flag effect for the regime at a time that it has, suffering under economic turmoil, has had recent protests in which hundreds were killed. The U.S. has essentially created a martyr for Iran and boosted the regime indirectly.
Now, Chase, Trump has warned that the US could hit 52 targets in Iran, harking back to 1979 symbolically. I mean, how seriously are those threats being taken in the region?
I think that the threats need to be taken seriously, but it highlights the danger of an escalation spiral. Trump will, having said that publicly now, will be forced to respond if Iran threatens U.S. interests or military facilities. That in turn will trigger a very strong, robust response from Iran, and you get again an escalation spiral and possibly a regional war. So it's a very dangerous situation.
Well, on that point then, I mean, what do you think other countries in the region are thinking about this spike in tension between the US and Iran? Are they readying themselves for some kind of action?
All countries in the region and the EU, U.S. allies, were basically caught off guard, not informed about this beforehand. They've called for restraint, but at this point, I mean, all sides need to do more than issue boilerplate calls for restraint or concern. The only side that's supported this has been Israel, which is was informed about the strike beforehand, and they are also kind of preparing for any backlash from groups in Gaza or Hezbollah in Lebanon or Iranian proxies in Syria in case there's a larger conflagration and Iran chooses to respond there.
All right, DW's Chase Winter, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a look now at some of the other stories making news around the world. Thousands of people have marched in Hong Kong near the border to voice their protest against traders from mainland China. Now, the traders buy duty-free products in Hong Kong. They resell them in China. Locals say this raises prices. Hong Kong has seen more than 6 months of anti-government demonstrations. The death toll has risen sharply after a collapse of a hotel under construction in southern Cambodia. Authorities in the city of Kep pulled another dozen bodies from the rubble, bringing the total to at least 36. They did manage to rescue a puppy, raising hopes of finding more survivors. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has failed to get parliamentary backing for his new leftist government. In a first vote, he failed to win the required absolute majority, but Sánchez is expected to get the required simple majority needed in a second round of voting on Tuesday. In Croatia, voters are going to the polls in the second round of a presidential election there. Now, the vote is a runoff between former Prime Minister Zoran Milanovic, who is a social democrat, and the conservative incumbent candidate Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic. Well, Australia's bushfires are being described as a national catastrophe. And just take a look at these orange skies behind me. They were turned orange from those high levels of smoke. And then consider that these images aren't from Australia at all. In fact, they're from Auckland in New Zealand. Now, that is some 2,000 kilometres away. At least 24 people have died in the blazes. Thousands have lost their homes. And experts now calculate that more than 500 million animals have also been killed. While the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he is facing strong criticism for his handling of the crisis. Emergency services are hoping that cooler temperatures will bring some respite on Sunday, but it's not expected to last.
Another costly and deadly day in this months-long catastrophe. Saturday's soaring temperatures and strong winds fanned hundreds of blazes across 3 states. Exhausted firefighters powerless to halt the destruction. The flames consumed hundreds of properties, leaving local communities shocked.
These people next door lost their house. You know, people in the court, most of the houses in the court are gone. All these houses here are gone. It's devastating.
Battling the worst bushfires in living memory, Australian leaders admit they're in uncharted territory.
We can't pretend that this is something we've experienced before. It's not. Because the weather activity we're seeing, the extent and spread of the fires, the speed at which they're going, the way in which they're attacking communities who've never, ever seen fire before, is unprecedented.
Satellite images show the scale of the fires along Australia's southeast coast. The severity of the crisis has prompted Prime Minister Scott Morrison to mobilise up to 3,000 military reservists to assist exhausted volunteer firefighters. Morrison has faced intense criticism for his response to the disaster.
Putting their lives at risk. That's how much we enjoy it, mate, putting our lives at risk. I do it for my local community, I do it for the township of Nelligan and the people of Australia. That's what I do it for. I don't do it for you, Scott Morrison. I don't do it for any of you pricks in government, parliament, anything.
Cooler conditions are expected to give some relief to firefighting efforts, but officials warn the reprieve won't be enough to get fires under control, let alone put them out.
Well, the tennis world is acknowledging